What's good, YouTube? This is Stormybman, and I am back. Yes, I am back. Welcome to Profile, Evander Holyfield. This is part 4, and after covering the illustrious career of this great warrior in the sport of boxing and champion, saved this part 4, the final part, the basic round robin that took place and wars that took place between Evander Holyfield and his number one nemesis, the man who stood in the way of him becoming heavyweight champion of the world at one time, and then who also became the person who stood between him and his credibility as heavyweight champion of the world. The reason for that being is that Iron Mike Tyson, once he became the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, ruled the division with a charisma and an excitement that saw him become the most popular fighter in the world and the most popular fighter since Muhammad Ali. Tyson, who seemed to knock opponents out almost in a cartoonish manner, had developed a reputation in the division as not only the supreme champion and head of the division, but also the boogeyman. Fighters would literally be shaking in their knees when they would get in the ring to fight Mike Tyson. And respectfully so, he garnered that type of respect and image. And seeing that we were coming into a new age media-wise, it was the MTV era, his highlight reel knockouts were all over the place, making him what they call Kid Dynamite. Evander Holyfield, who had been the undisputed cruiserweight champion of the world, had always had his eyes set on the heavyweight division, because as early as him being 8 years old, he had told the story of his coach telling him that if he worked hard, he could be heavyweight champion of the world one day. That was a sentiment that Evander held close to his heart, and it was always on his mind as long as he could grow big enough to compete at the heavyweight division. Once he had captured the undisputed cruiserweight title, he knew that his dreams were definitely within reach. This found him being right there on the cusp of victory. But it was not to be. Mike Tyson, with a signed agreement to face Evander Holyfield in November of 1990, suffered his first loss by knockout by Buster Douglas in Tokyo, Japan in February. Out of the window went Evander's chance at facing the most dominant heavyweight in recent memory. But there was a silver lining. James Buster Douglas, who had defeated Mike Tyson after going through court proceedings where Tyson's promotional group, Don King Productions, tried to have the decision of the bout overturned in the courts, believing that when Tyson knocked Douglas down in the 8th round of their fight, that Douglas received what was considered a long count. Douglas got up, the bell rang, ended that round, and 2 rounds later, Buster knocked Tyson out in devastating fashion. Mind you, it was Tyson's promoter, Don King, not necessarily Tyson himself, but what is he going to do? He went along with his promoter. King tried to do everything he could to have the titles taken away from Buster Douglas. Now, the best thing would have been to do is have a rematch, right? But because of the court proceedings and everything, Buster Douglas elected not to fight Tyson in an immediate rematch and decided to give the shot to the #1 contender by all sanctioning bodies, who was Evander the Real Deal Holyfield. Now, this fight was to be scheduled in October of 1990. Buster would go on to receive, I believe it was like at that time, a $24 million guaranteed contract, and would open the Mirage Hotel, Steve Wynn's Mirage Hotel at the time. So, Evander, though he had lost the $12 million opportunity, still had the heavyweight title shot that he had coveted. History was beckoning. Evander took on Buster Douglas and knocked him out in 3 rounds. Justice was served for Evander. He got his opportunity, he met it, and became undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. This was history because you had the first undisputed cruiserweight champion of the world become, for the first time, the first undisputed heavyweight champion of the world from both divisions. He was truly the real deal. Now, Evander sought to immediately give Tyson an opportunity because he felt like he didn't get that chance to defeat Tyson, but Tyson and Tyson's people, Don King, went around and about acting like they still held the title and the leverage in the sport. But they found out that they did not. So negotiations fell apart, and Evander defended his title for the first time against George Foreman. Big George, a worthy challenger, and Evander fought an exciting 12-round fight where Evander won a unanimous decision, and Big George won the respect of journalists, fans, and naysayers alike when he competed with a world champion at the top of the sport, because many people felt that George, in his comeback, was fighting a lot of setup fights that made him look more exciting than he may have really been. But he proved himself a worthy challenger. The door was now open for Tyson and Holyfield. scheduled for November 8th, 1991, Caesar's Palace. The real deal was going to finally get his chance to show the world that he was the man and not Tyson. But it was not to be again. The cruel hand of fate intervened once again, and Mike Tyson had to postpone the fight due to an injury, and then also due to an outside of the ring experience that threatened his freedom. I will not discuss Tyson's circumstance out of respect. However, Evander had to go on and fight someone else. That was when Burt Cooper stepped in, and he defeated Cooper, as I alluded to in the previous episode. But fast forward, people. Fast forward to November 1996. Tyson, who had become the WBA champion after defeating Bruce Seldon, and prior to Bruce Seldon, he had fought Buster Mathis Jr. and Frank Bruno, which he captured the WBC crown from Bruno. It was a rematch between the two that saw Tyson take Bruno out in 3 rounds, becoming a 2-time heavyweight champion himself. Lennox Lewis was the #1 contender for the WBC at that time, and Tyson did not feel he wanted to take on Lewis at that time. So he vacated the belt when he had the opportunity to fight for Bruce Seldon's WBA title, and he defeated Bruce Seldon, setting the stage for he and Evander, their final showdown. WBA heavyweight champion Mike Tyson would fight Evander Holyfield. This was November 9th, 1996. Holyfield had looked very lackluster in a fight against Bobby Shares at the time. And many people were saying that they hoped that Iron Mike wouldn't kill Evander or hurt him real bad. Holyfield had already been knocked out by Riddick Big Daddy Bowe. He had suffered another setback where he lost to Michael Moore. And there were rumblings and mumblings that he just may not be the fighter he once was. And of course, Tyson and his people felt like this is a good name as I mount my comeback to put on my record. So they saw Evander as food in this fight. But never underestimate. Evander came into the fight an underdog, and deservedly so. But the one thing that was not considered was he had always felt he never got the respect because he hadn't fought Tyson. The opportunity to face Tyson meant that Evander could reclaim everything all in one shot. So he went about training for Tyson. he brought in young fighters, powerful, strong fighters, to test his mettle, to test his will, if he was still able to compete at that high level. Because like I said, the naysayers had put Evander in such a place that he may have been even doubting himself. So he prayed, which is what he was known to do. He prayed and prayed and worked, even sparring the young phenom David Tua to prepare him for this fight. Tua was such a strong fighter, built along the same lines and stature as a Mike Tyson, and with every bit as lethal, if not more lethal, a left hook that Tyson was so noted for, made Evander rethink things in their sparring sessions. Evander remarked once of Tua after a grueling session, "He hit me so hard I thought I wanted to throw up." David Tua was that kind of puncher, as many fallen fighters who faced him can attest. So, on fight night, Evander was going to face Mike Tyson. In the locker room, he began to warm up, as the fighters do before the main event. And he began to sing spiritual songs. Evander in his dressing room had become like a church on a Sunday after the choir began one of the most popular songs in their congregation. There was an unnerving feeling initially, but it turned to something of joy because they could see how relaxed Evander was going into the ring. His ring walk, he sat there calmly singing, praying to himself as he entered the ring, not praying out of fear. Evander was a prayerful man. I recall sitting with a few of my guys from the gym. We were all watching this on, I think it was TVKO at the time, the pay-per-view. And everyone had remarked and asked me all week long, "Who you got? Who you got?" You know, I had watched all of the pre-fight hype, press conferences, weigh-ins, the sound bites. They were talking smack to each other. And I heard Evander talking a little smack this time around that I had never heard him say. At one point, reporters asked Tyson, "Do you feel like Evander is the type of fighter that you're going to be able to smash?" And Tyson remarked to the reporter, he said, "Listen, I've been smashed all my life." They asked Evander the same question. And Evander said, he said, bullies aren't accustomed to people smashing them. And that's when Tyson said, "I've been smashed all my life." And one other reporter remarked to Evander, he said, "Do you think it's important to get Tyson out of there early?" He was like, "Well, I'm going to try to get him out of there." He's like, "But if I don't, it's just going to be a long, drawn-out fight." Evander was speaking with supreme confidence, something that he did when he was champion, and he never wavered from that. Tyson, I believe, began to feel a little bit of something because he knew and remembered their sparring sessions when they were younger. He knew that Evander was a real champion, even though at a lower weight before facing him, and then soon at heavyweight, that Evander was probably going to be the best fighter he ever fought. This is one of those situations where everybody has something to say. So I was asked, "Stormy, who you think it wasn't until the ring walk, when I saw Evander on his way to the ring, that I turned to my brothers and I said, Evander's going to kick this dude's ass tonight. They were like, man, what? You crazy, man. Tyson going to smoke this dude, blah, blah, blah. Recalling the Bobby Chairs performance where Evander really struggled against Bobby Chairs on a card titled The Night of the Heavyweights when he fought Chairs, Ray Mercer, and I think it was Ray Mercer and Lennox Lewis fought as the main event. And no, yes, it was, I think it was Ray Mercer and Lennox Lewis at the main event there, Madison Square Garden. And Tim Witherspoon fought somebody. But it was a good card, but Evander looked really bad on that night. So they couldn't believe me when I was talking about the fact that Evander would beat Tyson. And I sat there and I simply said to them, I said, listen, man, this guy knows that this fight here defines his career as a heavyweight. He had always wanted to fight Tyson, but there were roadblocks. There was always something coming up. The fight was canceled twice, 3 times if you count the fact that Buster knocked Mike out before when they had a guaranteed contract to face each other. So I said, Evander is living for this moment. This is going to be his night. They thought I was talking fairy tales. But as the action unfolded, they were finally going to see that sometimes you have to look at fights outside of what you actually see. You have to look deeper. And that's where I began to really hold fast to understanding that there are so many intangibles in boxing. And boxing is truly a mental sport. It's physical, yes, because of the physical exertion and what you put your body through and what your body absorbs. But the mental aspect of being able to go through those very trials that you suffer from physically. If you're not mentally strong, the body can only be as strong as the mind, not in reverse. So, as the bell opened for the first round, Evander, who had been training to watch for Tyson's devastating left hook, went out totally prepared. And Mike opens up with a huge overhand right that not only lands, but it knocked Evander senseless for a second. It connected. And Evander just stumbled and went backward, but he did not. Evander told the tale. Fight. But then I realized the Burt Cooper fight. Mike watched that Burt Cooper fight against Evander Holyfield, and he saw Cooper landing those right hands on Evander, and he knew I punched hella times harder than Burt Cooper. So if this man can get wobbled and knocked into the ropes by Cooper's right hand, I should be able to put him out of his misery, quick, fast, and in a hurry. But there was one slight miscalculation that Tyson had about that. Evander was the type of fighter that he would absorb some shots from time to time, and it would get his competitive juices going. He would begin to dig deep and fight back. If you hit him hard, he was going to try to hit you twice as hard. The Warrior had come to fight on this night. Tyson tried all of the tricks. He tried using his head. He tried elbowing, hit low a couple of times. Evander was there to fight. He even, at one point, hit Evander after the bell. I think it was either first or second round. He hit Evander after the bell. And Evander hit him right back as referee Mitch Halpern, my favorite referee, by the way, RIP to Mitch Halpern. The man was a wonderful referee for the sport. Tyson hit Holyfield. The bell goes ding. Tyson whops Holyfield upside the head, and Holyfield hit him right back. And Tyson turned and gave him a little smirk like, oh. This was a fight, ladies and gentlemen. And this was not one of those fights where the heavyweights had their bellies covered up by their boxing trunks. This was not one of those fights where the heavyweights were coked out and, going in there for the payday. This was a battle for legacy, the name in the sport. Who is the man in the sport? From the era where two guys, where people were initially in favor of Tyson, then others began to support Holyfield. So it was never 50-50. But there was enough of a following for Holyfield that there may have been a 30 to 40% support range for him. And then there were some people who just didn't like Tyson because of his out of the ring antics, and some people just felt like he wasn't that good. He was overhyped. So this is what it became. Now, as we go on through the rounds, we see that Mike Tyson probably wasn't in the best of shape. He was getting tired. Evander was hitting him to the body. He was pushing him back. Tyson just didn't have the answers. It was a fight that was competed on the highest of levels for these gentlemen. And Evander was amped. At one point, I think it was even in round 6 or 7, Tyson hit Evander with his famous right hand to the body, right uppercut, which Evander had stopped him in his tracks, and he kind of took a step back, and then Tyson followed up with a couple more punches, but Evander fired back. When those punches landed, I knew Holyfield was going to win, because they didn't have the same effect on Holyfield like they had on everyone else. Typically, those shots that Tyson would hit you with, that right hook to the body followed with his uppercut with the same hand, double punch. Tyson had beat so many guys, put them on their ass, even a knockout from that. Guys like Jose Ribalta, Frank Bruno, they fell victim to that. Michael Spinks fell victim to the right hook to the body. Put him on his knees. Evander took it. And Evander didn't like body shots from anybody, because the two fighters who banged him to the body the most and got victories out of him were James Lights Out Tony, later down the line, and Riddick Bowe. So it was definitely proof that Evander was there to win on this night. At one point, Tyson, in a fierce exchange, it might even be during one of these clips highlighted on the screen that you see here. And by the way, the clips are from the first and second fight. The two clips on the left side are from the first fight. The two clips on the right side are from the second fight. And during a moment of exchanging, Evander began to fight Tyson off of him, and the crowd began to chant his name, Holyfield, Holyfield, Holyfield. And Tyson, all the wind seemed to come out of his sails, because it was like he heard them cheering for Holyfield and he didn't want to fight anymore. It's amazing when you talk about the mental aspect of the sport. And short moment after that, with a left hook uppercut to the breadbasket, Holyfield put Tyson on his ass. Pure D mayhem in the arena. People were cheering, jumping up and down, and Tyson got up, but he just didn't look like he was going to win. Now, the fight went on all the way to the 10th round. And in between, there were moments when Tyson had some shots that he landed, good shots. But Evander would always fire right back. He was fighting him in close. He was turning him. He was pushing him back. One time, Tyson ran into Holyfield with his head first, and seemed to claim he was headbutted. But it was deliberately Tyson who initiated that. And he looked to the ref for like some kind of consolation. He wanted something, stop the fight or whatever. But they looked at it. They saw it was really no cuts, and they let the fight resume. When the 10th round happened, now remember, Tyson was knocked out in the 10th round by Buster Douglas. So we began to see history repeating itself. Because in the 9th round, Holyfield sent Tyson back to his corner after a fuselage of punches that had Tyson teetering. Okay. And when he walked back to his corner, he was basically like he was walking on his heels. Okay. They could have stopped it in the corner, but they didn't. They sent Mike out to go out on his shield. And in the 10th round, Evander opened up a barrage of punches that saw Tyson turn and try to run away, similar almost to the exact movement that Burt Cooper did when Evander unleashed those series of uppercuts on Cooper and was going for his head. Tyson behaved in the same exact manner as Cooper. And then Evander pounced on top of him, unleashing shots until Mitch Halpern stepped in and waved the fight off. It was a TKO victory for Evander, the real deal Holyfield. He became heavyweight champion for the 3rd time. And he defeated the unconquerable Mike Tyson. He had put to bed all of those sentiments from people who had downed him and said, "You're the champ, but you're not Tyson. You're a champ, but you would never beat Tyson. You can't hold a candle to Tyson." All of this that he had to endure and incur, during his heavyweight title reign and challenge to the title, he had laid all those demons to rest. And what did Evander do in victory? He gave God the glory. He praised God so much that I think it was Jim Gray in the interview said, "Let's get off of God for a moment." And Evander kept talking about God, which was a good thing on his behalf, because that damn Jim Gray, you like to put your hands around his throat, you know what I'm saying? And squeeze till something pops. But I digress. On this night, Evander Holyfield proved that he was better than Mike Tyson. In a number of ways, we already knew it, but in the ring, he got a certification. Now, in the post-fight press conference, Iron Mike Tyson, for the first time, and I don't think he's done it since, showed true professionalism and sportsmanship, congratulating Evander with his victory and he said, "Hey, brother, I just want to shake your hand. You know, you had a great performance or whatever." It was really a weird experience seeing Mike humbled like that. He wasn't humbled in Tokyo when he lost to Buster Douglas because, you know, people were talking about Buster being lucky. He fought over his ability because his mom had died. They weren't really giving Buster credit for winning a boxing match. They found excuses for Mike. But on this night, when he was fighting a so-called perceived faded fighter in Evander Holyfield, and Holyfield whooped his ass, even more so than Buster did. You had to give it up for Evander, and Mike knew that. It was great. You could feel the adrenaline rush resonate throughout the entire sport. The real deal whooped Mike Tyson's ass. Today, we don't know what that means because it's something that you recall from history. But for those of us who lived through that moment in time, it's the equivalent of had Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua never fought, and neither one of them had that chance to prove against the other. And then a few years later, they finally do it. And the guy that you thought wouldn't win the fight does win the fight and wins it emphatically. That's the kind of feeling that was. It was like an out-of-body experience for a sports fan of boxing. It was awesome. And I remember being able to now rest my principles on what I really believe that drives the sport, and that's character. Character goes so far, such a long way in life as well as in professional sports. Because sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes you tie. But the whole idea about being involved, participating, is about give your best, give your all. Don't shortchange yourself and don't shortchange anyone else. And everything else will settle. You'll be able to overcome. You'll be able to endure and take on more as a result of that. Staunch character will carry a person through trial. This was a great fight. It didn't have any particular type standout action, but it was the two figureheads of the division going against each other finally. And that's why the fight was titled Finally on the poster, because they were supposed to face each other several times prior, and it didn't come off. So we finally got to see what we were going to see. Both men had dealt with problems, and both men had adversity in their careers, but who bounced back the strongest? This is what was being shown here. One moment, people. Sorry about that. So, Mike lost to Evander. Leave it up to Don King, who would say, hey, we're going to do a rematch. 6 months later. The rematch would be titled The Sound and the Fury. Why? Only Don King can answer that. But as we approach the rematch, many people began to change their sentiments as far as how the fight would be approached. So going into the rematch, some people were saying like Holyfield's victory was a fluke. Others were saying in rematches, the one who usually wins the first fight will win the second fight. Typically easier. But this one was one that would be considered a brawl for it all. As I was asked going into the rematch, Stormy, what you think? What's going to happen? I said Evander's going to win. But I said I wouldn't be surprised if something unanticipated takes place in this fight. Meaning like either guy could go down early or something, or, just something that you don't see on the horizon. And so as they began to set things up for this fight, the rematch, Tyson came in much better shape. I have to say that. He was definitely physically in shape. But there was something a little bit different going into this fight. And it was soon to reveal itself early. As the rematch started out, Tyson came out boxing. Holyfield would later recall that when he saw Tyson trying to box him, he knew that victory was assured because Tyson could not box better than Evander. His chance was the proverbial puncher's chance, and Evander was prepared for that 100%. Now, as the bell ended to the first round, both guys walked back to their corners, and Tyson walked back to his corner kind of slowly, looking at Evander like he had some kind of trepidation or something. It was just a weird, eerie feeling. And I remember in the second round, sitting with my guys again, we were watching this fight unfold. And I told them at a point where I saw Evander pushing Tyson into the ropes, working on the inside, and Tyson kind of being submissive and looking to the ref. He was looking to the ref like complaining, and he wasn't into the fight. And Tyson wasn't the kind of guy to be looking to the ref for anything. In fact, Tyson has hit refs during going after the opponents. He was always a savage in the ring, and you literally have to peel him off of a guy, an opponent that he's hurting or putting the hurt on. So when I saw Evander physically imposing himself on Mike, I looked at the guys and I said, Mike Tyson is coming apart mentally here. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, he's like letting Evander push him around, and I never seen him let guys do this to him before. And they couldn't see what I was talking about. So the bell ends to the second round. And I was saying, this is just weird. And then the bell rings for the third round, and they come out, and Holyfield motions to the referee that Tyson don't have his mouthpiece. So Tyson gets his mouthpiece back from the corner, Richie Giacchetti, and he goes back out and they begin to fight. And Tyson opens up. It's actually the clip that you see on the right side here at the bottom. That's the clip where Tyson was coming out more aggressive than he had in the first 2 rounds. And he was really going after Evander, and the crowd was into it. They were cheering. They were like, yeah, that's the Mike we know. He was doubling up with some shots. He was going after Evander. Evander pushes him off of him and meets his challenge. You know, Evander's firing back. And then when they fall into a clinch, Tyson bites Holyfield on his ear. I think it was the right ear that he bit the first time. And Holyfield jumped up and down, and he looked like he was, and couldn't tell what had happened, but I saw it immediately. He bit him, and I'm like, he bit him. And the guy sitting with me was like, what did he bit him for? I was like, I don't know. And we're watching this, right? And so Tyson, the referee, calls a timeout, and he says he bit his ear. And Tyson said that was a punch. He was like, bullshit. That was Mills Lane. R.I.P. to Mills Lane, great referee. He said, you bit his ear. And he said it's going to be a 2-point deduction here. And they asked Evander, did he want to continue fighting? And Evander, who was standing over there in the corner, he was praying. You could see he was praying to himself. He was mumbling and praying to himself. And he would later recount that when they let the fight continue, he initially thought about going across the ring and just doing a flying drop kick on Mike Tyson. But he said, no, he said, people will remember me for what I'm doing. He was like, so I have to keep it together. And that's what he did. And he went right after Tyson, started banging on him again, and Tyson bit him on the other ear. Dude, it was at this point I was like, fuck Mike Tyson, man. And the bell rings to end the 3rd round. Holyfield goes back to his corner. The cameras captured everything. He said, he bit both of my ears. And they sitting there, they putting water on his ear. A piece of Holyfield's ear is missing from the first bite. The second bite, you could see teeth marks in his ear. And Holyfield is just sitting there shaking his head. And Mills Lane comes over and sees it. And he says, goes back to Tyson's corner. And he said, that's it, you're done. And Richie Giacchetti, Tyson's chief second, thought Mills Lane said, that's it, you won. And he said, you won, Mike. And Mike stood up and he said, no, you're done. You're disqualified. And they were like, what? You know, and so Tyson was like, oh, you bitch, you don't want to fight and this and that. Then Tyson wants to get tough after biting the man twice. Now, I'll tell you something. The first bite, utter frustration and everything, that was the bite that took a piece of Holyfield's ear off. But Tyson knew with that savage act, he would be disqualified. He knew this, but it didn't happen. So what does he do? He bites him a fucking second time to ensure that it happens. And then when the fight was called and Tyson was disqualified, then Tyson decides he wants to be a badass. He's roaming around the ring and he's, taking swipes at people, and there was many of police and everything that came into the ring, and Tyson acting like he want to hit people and everything. Man, he could have did all of that energy in the fight, but he didn't, because he didn't want to fight. He knew in his heart he couldn't beat Evander Holyfield. He knew in his heart he couldn't defeat Lennox Lewis, which is why he gave up the WBC belt. Evander Holyfield, who was smaller than both of those guys because he came up from cruiserweight, fought Riddick Bowe 3 times. He fought Lennox Lewis twice. Who's the warrior? Tyson, people, was never what you thought he was. He was a facade. And Evander put a hole in that facade after Buster Douglas cracked it. Okay? He was done. Evander went on to become a 4-time heavyweight champion. Evander went on to have wars still with Lennox Lewis, Michael Moore, who he got his victory back against. Who has Tyson rematched outside of Frank Bruno? None of the men that whooped him. I was so disappointed in this situation because I wanted the fight to come to a natural conclusion. If Mike gets knocked out, he gets knocked out. If Evander gets knocked out, he gets knocked out. This is something that, if for no other reason, a perfect display of courage and confidence in the sport, and cowardly unconfident from a fighter like Mike Tyson. So everything that y'all thought that he was, and you could go back and see his historical clips of his knockouts and all of that, that was all smoke and mirrors. Yes, the knockouts were real, some of them, because there were some questionable knockouts in his return to the ring from his time away. But Evander was the real heavyweight champion between the two of them. And it should not be forgotten. It should forever be notated that Holyfield was a true warrior. He was the real deal. So, as I finish out this story and talk about the profile of this great warrior, what it stood for history is catapult Evander Holyfield to championship heavyweight, and he took his dinner. He took it all away from Mike. Mike has since forever been a shell of who he once was. And he'll never have that total respect that he could have had and enjoyed because of his pitiful antics in this ring against this champion. Could you imagine Muhammad Ali biting Joe Frazier, biting George Foreman? Hell, Larry Holmes was kicking the shit out of aged Ali, who had some other things going wrong with him physically. He didn't try to bite Larry Holmes. Salute to Evander Holyfield, the real deal, the real champion, undisputed cruiserweight champion, undisputed heavyweight champion, 4-time champion of the world. He will go down in history as the warrior, and he carried himself as such with respect, and respect that he earned in the ring. This is Stormybman. You've been watching Profile Evander Holyfield. until I come up with another profile. That'll be it for now. Thank you for tuning in and for watching. Please smash the like button. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to the channel. This is the type of content I like to bring to the community, to talk about the sport, the best aspects of it. Sometimes we have to mention the worst aspects of it, but it's all a part of what transpires. I want to say salute to the LDBC and all the brothers and sisters out there. Until the next time, peace.